Dallas Cowboys gave us a massive injury update ahead of tomorrow's matchup with the New Orleans Saints, and honestly, the way that it played out, this is perfect heading into the future, so I'll break that down and much more on this episode of Cowboys Digest. Welcome in everybody to Cowboys Digest. I'm your host Peter Vryonis, and today we'll be discussing the Jake Ferguson injury, which was believed to be scary at first. I mean, it looked like that way on the field, but it ended up being not so bad, and we should expect the tight end back before long. He will not play on Sunday, so let's just get that out of the way right now. But before we get into the video, I want to let you guys know that around 85% of you are not subscribed who are watching right now, so go ahead, hit that subscribe button. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it means a ton to myself as well as just the brand in general. So make sure to go ahead and do that. It doesn't cost you guys anything, and it means the world to me, so thanks again. But let's get straight into it over here. Jake Ferguson will be out on Sunday. This was from NFL Rumors, and it was originally tweeted by Adam Schefter that he was doubtful for Sunday's game, but this basically confirmed that. This was a few hours after the Adam Schefter report, so it's unfortunate, and especially considering that Jake Ferguson is the number 2 target for Dak Prescott. It's going to be a big loss, especially against a New Orleans Saints team that looks pretty good, albeit against the Carolina Panthers. But they did look really good in week 1, and so did that defense, so they're going to have to get creative, and we'll probably see a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of handoffs, and it might be an ugly football game, but it doesn't matter. You got to get the W, and that's the only thing that matters at the end of the day. But we take a look here. Cowboys tight end Jake Ferguson, this from John Machota, said the pain of his knee was a 10 on Sunday. It's a 0 today. The initial thought was that it was an ACL injury. Thankfully, just a little bone bruise. I don't even think it's grade 1. That's what Ferguson said about the injury itself. And he went on to say on his X account that God is good. So he may have dodged a bullet in that front. And take a look here at how important he has been to the Dallas Cowboys passing game, just dating back to last season. He was the number 2 target for Dak Prescott, 761 yards, an average reception of 10.7 yards. So that's a monstrous number for a tight end. And he was impacting the game in a multitude of different ways. He's very dynamic in the catching game. He's a good blocker, not a great blocker, but he does a lot of different things out there on the field, and his athleticism separates him from a lot of the tight ends that we see around the National Football League. And not having him in the lineup against a very athletic defense like the New Orleans Saints, that could be rough. I mean, it's not going to be an easy matchup regardless, despite the Cowboys being 6-point favorites heading into the weekend at home, where they play exceptionally well. Like, there's no doubting that it's going to be a tight matchup, but the Cowboys should still walk away with a W. But it gets a little bit tougher when Dak Prescott has less weapons around him. The running game, I thought it was solid in week 1 around Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle, but they're going to need a little bit more now with the absence of Jake Ferguson. They're going to need Zeke to maybe go for 60 or 65 yards as opposed to 40 like he did in week 1 against a stout Cleveland defense. They're going to need Rico Dowdle to find some sort of rhythm because he just wasn't able to establish himself in that contest against Cleveland as well. So they're going to need more. They're going to need all hands on deck here because Jake Ferguson, the loss of him cannot be understated. Like I mentioned before, the athleticism that he possesses, the silky, smooth hands that he has in order to catch passes in traffic and be a red zone target for Dak Prescott, it's a big void to fill. So I don't know how they're going to do it. I expect Luke Schoonmaker to get a bit of action. Maybe they signed a tight end today to the practice squad just to have that little extra depth depending on the severity of the injury. But if it's 1 week, maybe if it's 2 weeks, I think the Cowboys will be fine. They'll be able to withstand the absence of Ferg, but it's still a big loss regardless. And you take a look at the defenses, the top-rated defenses in the National Football League through week 1. The Saints are number 2 in defensive yards allowed, and the Cowboys are right there with them at number 5, albeit the Cowboys played a much tougher opponent in Cleveland, and the Saints played one of the worst teams that I've seen in the last decade. So there's levels to this. There's definitely levels to this. But the Saints had a fun time against Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers in Week 1, and I don't expect that to translate into Week 2. I showed you guys the betting odds here. The over-under, I think that's a little high, if I'm being honest with you, especially with Jake Ferguson out. He may have shifted that line, but the original line for the spread was 6.5 points. So the Cowboys were 6.5 point favorites heading into the contest tomorrow, but now it's 6, and honestly, the points, the Cowboys side of things is a little bit more favorable on that end. So I don't know. I expect it to be close. I don't expect it to be a blowout. A one-possession game is what I'm looking at here. Whether it's a touchdown or a field goal remains to be seen, but I think it's going to be a bloodbath, and I'm excited. I cannot wait for these two teams to go at it. I mean, last time the Cowboys played the Saints, it was sort of a dog walking. They walloped them and made Taysom Hill kind of regret a few things there. So, look, the Cowboys looked really good last week. Deshaun Watson did not look very good, so we got to take that defensive performance with a grain of salt. But one thing that we do know is that Micah Parsons really showed off his versatility, something that we hadn't really seen under Dan Quinn. He was mostly a pass rusher, and he was mostly a pass rusher last week as well, but we didn't really see him line up exclusively as an edge rusher. We saw him in a nose tackle formation as well. We saw him as a linebacker for a couple of snaps. So just using that athleticism that he possesses, I think that's going to be the key heading into tomorrow's matchup. I can't wait for those two teams to go at it. I think the defenses are both special on both teams, so it's going to be, I wouldn't say low scoring. I wouldn't go that far because the offenses still have a lot of talent on their respective units, but the Cowboys defense was phenomenal in that Week 1 matchup, and I mean, so was the Saints. So I expect a good one. Unfortunately, Jake Ferguson is going to be out, so it's crappy news. There's no doubt that it's crappy news, but at the same time, it's better that he's out for just a week-to-week basis as opposed to a long-term injury. It was expected to be an ACL injury, the initial thought at least. So luckily the Cowboys dodged a bullet on that front, and they should have him back within a week or two. So that'll be a welcomed addition because, as you can see, he is vital to what the Cowboys try to do offensively week in, week out. It can't be all CeeDee Lamb. You need other guys to step up, and that's why I loved what I saw out of Brandon Cooks in Week 1. I mean, he came up with that touchdown grab, and he's just as solid as they come as a number 2 receiver. So he's probably going to have some added workload to his plate there, but it's going to have to be by committee, as I mentioned, for the Dallas Cowboys. Everyone is going to have to step up and help fill the absence of Jake Ferguson, which is a really big loss at this point of the season, especially against a team like the New Orleans Saints. But that'll wrap it up for this episode of Cowboys Digest. Thank you guys so much for making it this far. Really appreciate it. And again, make sure to hit the subscribe button because around 85% of you are not subscribed, so that would mean the world to me. And leave a comment down below. Do you think the Cowboys dodged a bullet here? Do you think Jake Ferguson will be back in Week 3? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Go Cowboys.